strategic depth. And there's this clip you always refer to, this video you always refer to, Aaron, that I think highlights the other reason why the U.S. is in Syria.
I got it. Yeah. This is Dana Stroul. She's now working for the Biden administration. But back during the Trump administration, she was part of a congressional study group, and she explained the real reason why the U.S. military is in Syria.
The United States still had compelling forms of leverage on the table to shape an outcome that was more conducive and protective of U.S. interests. And we identified 4. So the first one was the 1/3 of Syrian territory that was owned via the U.S. military with its local partners, democratic forces. Now, this was a Lightfoot.
Yes, the U.S. military owns 1/3 of Syria, according to Dana Stroul.
Footprint on the U.S. military, only about 1,000 troops over the course of the Syria Study Group's report, and then the tens of thousands of forces, both Kurdish and Arab, under the Syrian Democratic Forces. And that 1/3 of Syria is the resource-rich, it's the economic powerhouse of Syria. So where the hydrocarbons are, which obviously is very much in the public debate here in Washington these days, as well as the agricultural powerhouse. But we argued that it wasn't just about this 1/3 of Syrian territory that the U.S. military and our military presence owned, both to fight ISIS and also as leverage for affecting the overall political process for the broader Syrian conflict.
There it is.
So you hear that? Yes, we're officially there to fight ISIS, but really occupying 1/3 of Syria gives us leverage, which is like, that's like mafia talk. Like, you have leverage over somebody, so you can bully them into doing what you want. That's pretty much what she's saying.
We're starving them in order to force them to basically concede to our terms and give up their sovereignty and become basically an extension of Jordan.
Yeah. And then she goes on to say another form of leverage is our sanctions, where we can keep their country in rubble because it's largely destroyed thanks to us, in no small part because of our dirty war. And we can hold a card, she says, on reconstruction because of our sanctions. So military occupation and sanctions, the perfect form of leverage to keep a country impoverished and desperate because they made the mistake of resisting our dirty war.
And just because this is a super chat, no, I'm not. That's not Starbucks. It's Amazon. It's Whole Foods, controlled by Jeff Bezos. So much better, I'm sure. But yeah, it's Dana Stroul, by the way. She was on the Syrian study group. She seems like a Zionist. I don't know. She
well, no, she is Jewish, and it's so funny. It's like, this Jewish lady from Maryland, or wherever she's from, like is talking about how basically she runs Syria, and now she's in a similar position. She's like a senior Pentagon official. Her portfolio is the Middle East.
She's one of the neocons in a civilian position
100%.
in the Pentagon. She's never picked up a gun and fought a war.
No,
and she's seems like someone who gets really uncomfortable when she sees a Palestine solidarity protest. She feels unsafe on campus. So this is, and you listen to what she's saying about Syria. This is the same tactic that Israel, by extension, the Biden administration in which she serves, is using towards the Gaza Strip right now, using starvation, hunger, and siege and reconstruction as a weapon to try to force them to basically give up the struggle. Same thing. Unless on the other side of the border from the previously unknown, basically secret base, Tower 22. This is Al Tanf, which is an illegal U.S. base inside Syria on the other side of the Jordanian border. And on the right, you see a U.S. Hummer with an American with a mounted machine gun, an American flag. On the left, what do you see? Those are Salafi or jihadi fighters who were basically being recycled through that base after Donald Trump kind of was gradually rolling up the dirty war on Syria, in which jihadist bandits, including ISIS, were deployed to try to destroy the Syrian state. So this is the illegal destabilizing activity that took place and is probably still taking place in Al Tanf. Actually, there have been airstrikes by the Syrian government on these very same forces. And this is what the U.S. wants to conceal from us.
Yeah, and the claims that I saw out of Syria were that some of the forces that were hit in these U.S. bombings, these so-called retaliatory bombings by the U.S., hit militias that are fighting ISIS. Because certainly the U.S. is not fighting ISIS. That's the stated mission for the U.S. being in Syria. Like, we don't want to be there, but we have to be there to make sure ISIS doesn't rise again. Even though actually U.S. is pretty much never fighting ISIS. I don't know when the last time it was when the U.S. forces at that Syrian base actually engaged with ISIS. There have been Pentagon reports showing that they're barely fighting ISIS. People fighting ISIS are the people who the U.S. just bombed, the Syrian government and their allies.
Well, I mean, the U.S. did come in eventually, and in Trump's words, knock the hell out of ISIS. They destroyed half of Raqqa and killed tons of civilians. James Glynn, the general, or the general who presided over that, actually went to Israel to help counsel them on what to do with Gaza after October 7th. But prior to that, they were, in John Kerry's words, allowing ISIS to essentially march on Damascus. We were allowing ISIS to advance in order to force the hand of the Syrian government, which was never going to happen. Insanity, absolute insanity. And we all knew it was happening, along with the US support for Al Qaeda, in the form which now controls, it's basically its own de facto country in northwestern Syria. And isn't it interesting how they don't seem very interested in resisting Israel or the US presence there? They basically, Al Qaeda has been granted this kind of Turkish protectorate under the protective umbrella of NATO in northwestern Syria. So who is the US attacking now? It's all the forces that came together with the support of the IRGC and
well-educated Jewish lady from the US who is like bragging about how the US owns 1/3 of Syria, who, as you said, Max, has never fought in a war. The people who now have to die because of her policy of stealing Syria's resources. These three people right here, these three soldiers who were just killed on the Jordan-Syria border. These are the soldiers who were just killed in that drone strike. And then now Biden is now claiming to avenge by launching more bombs across the Middle East. These are the people who pay the price of policies like Dana Struhl's, on top of all the people in the region whose resources she's openly bragging about stealing.
Yeah, say their names. These are, Black American soldiers who didn't join the military to become human tripwires for war with Iran. They didn't join to defend Israel's strategic depth. They didn't join to go off to a secret base in the middle of some desert hinterland on the border of a country that the US is seeking to destabilize. They joined in order to have stable lives, in order to become middle class. It was one of their only options. And they were specialists. Many of I think they were involved in construction on this secret base to expand the base. And they were sent there with orders by Lloyd Austin, who is basically a token puppet of the imperial apparatus, put up as the Black Secretary of Defense, who disappeared for at least a week without even his colleagues in the Biden administration knowing. And they were sacrificed on the altar of imperialism and Israel. And this is not what these strikes are about. They were just put there to bait, along with every other soldier there, to provoke. They were fodder. They were sacrificed. And now the US has gotten what it wants, which is the escalation. And if you read the Washington